And we know that Australians have been having to deal with rising costs of living pressures. And this is not unique to Australia. This is occurring all around the world. Our economy has many moving parts at the moment, all of them under stress right around the world, as I was just sharing with some of those we joined for a cup of tea early this morning. You know, compared to the global financial crisis, this crisis that we've had as a result of COVID and the economic crisis that it has caused, 30 times worse than what occurred in the global financial crisis of over a decade ago. But at the same time, Australia has performed in terms of employment 50% better than we did on that occasion. And so despite the tremendous challenges that we face, our economic plan and our economic management is making a big difference. And despite the rising costs of living, and we will see that in inflation figures today, despite the increasing pressures on fuel prices and food and groceries, we were just there yesterday at a fruit and grocery market, the impact of the pandemic on supply chains, which actually pushes up the cost of everything right across the board. And we're seeing this all around the world. That's why the Treasurer and why Josh and I understood as we went into this budget that we had to ensure that we were going to deliver cost of living relief for Australians right now, because of what we're seeing, particularly in Europe and the pressure on fuel prices and the impact of that right across the economy. What we didn't want to see happen as Australians were getting up off the mat from the pandemic, as they were getting more confident and getting more strong, and as our economy continued to build momentum, what we didn't want to see happen at this crucial time is for Australians to not get support so they could push through this latest challenge when it comes to those cost of living pressures, particularly those impacted by events far away from Australia. And so that's why we put in place 3 simple things to help Australians. The first of all was to halve the petrol tax, and to do that for a temporary period of time while petrol prices were elevated because of what we saw in Europe, to help Australians get through those times of higher petrol prices. And that is giving Australians right now real savings, week after week after week. The second element was $250, which is being paid today to around 6 million Australians who are on pensions and other support payments all around the country, concession cards holders, veterans, those on the disability pension, others who are on fixed incomes, and they needed some extra help as well to get through this time of pressure. And so that's what we're doing today, and those payments are going out right across the country. And the third element of our cost of living package was to ensure that on the 1st of July, when people put their tax returns in, they'll be able to keep more of what they earn, with additional tax reduction support to help them deal with the cost of living pressures they're facing. Now, we couldn't have done any of this had we not seen the turnaround in our budget position achieved by our economic plan that got more Australians off welfare and into work. A budget turnaround from what we had estimated of over $100 billion, which enabled us to invest the $1.5 billion right now in that cost of living pressure relief and those $250 payments around the country. This was an important part of our budget. Of course, it wasn't the whole budget, but in budgets you've got to do things that help people right now, and then you've got to plan for the future, and you've got to invest in the things that matter. And today I'll be making some further remarks about the future of regional Australia. But just so we all understand what's happening with inflation at the moment, I thought this might be helpful. And yes, I'm going back to my Treasurer's days pulling out the charts. This is the expectation on inflation. So this already factors in an Australian inflation rate, potentially of what the markets are estimating at about 4.5% in Australia. And what you can see here is, yes, there are inflationary pressures in all the major economies around the world. You can see in the United States, up over 8%. Economies in Germany, the United Kingdom, and indeed in New Zealand and Canada, up around the 7% mark. But there's Australia, performing better than all of them when it comes to cost of living pressures around similar economies and advanced economies around the world. Now, that hasn't happened by accident. It is the function of an economic plan that is working. And so at this election, there is a choice. There's no doubt about the stresses and the pressures that the Australian economy is facing. That is understood. Well, at least it's understood by our side of politics. We know what the unemployment rate is. But what we need to focus on is who is going to be best able to manage those pressures going forward. A strong economy under Liberals and Nationals, or a weaker economy under Labor? A weaker economy under Anthony Albanese? These are the choices. This is what elections are about. They're about choices about who is going to be able to better manage those big, important issues that are going to determine how much you get paid in the future. The Labor Party runs around saying they can put up your wage. They can't do that. I'll tell you who can put up your wage. The business you work for. Your employer can do that. And your employer can only do that if they're running a business in a strong economy. And if they're not in a strong economy, then they can't. And that's why we are so focused on a strong economy, so Australians can have those opportunities. Now, I'll also be talking today about our regional jobs target, 450,000 of that 1.3 million jobs that we intend to create over the next 5 years, created right here in regional Australia. And what backs that in is this. Under Labor, we saw a 40% increase in unemployment in our regions. Under Liberals, we've seen an almost more than 20% fall in unemployment in our regions. That's the difference. Now, we had to do that through a period of drought, floods, fires, pandemic, mice plague, and we've been cutting unemployment in regional areas. Whereas under Labor, we saw around a 40% increase in unemployment in our regions. We have a strong plan for our regions, and I look forward to talking about more of that today at the presentation I'll be making shortly.